What is up? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lambgoat Vanflip podcast. I'm your host, LURK. Today I'm joined by OJ, not that OJ, of Byzantine, the West Virginia groove thrash metal outfit that has been kind of quiet for the last almost decade, but as of a couple months ago, you guys announced your seventh studio album, Harbingers, which follows up, I think, the Cicada Tree, which was in 2017, so about 8 years ago at this particular point. But yeah, it's coming out on June 13th. I don't know if I said that, but through Metal Blade Records. So you guys are again doing a release through Metal Blade. That's fucking pretty cool. OJ, welcome to the show.
Lurk, I appreciate it. I'm a Lambgoat fan. I've been following you guys for maybe 2 decades. I don't know. It seems like forever, our whole career. So I was excited to see you guys on the list today.
Well, that's an awesome compliment. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, we, I think we've probably covered everything that you guys have done since you were a band that kind of started in the early 2000s. Lambgoat was also around that time. I don't necessarily know if Alex was in the in the Byzantine universe at that particular point following you guys, but I know definitely I can check it right now. I pulled it up. What is the first post that we have from you guys or about you guys when you signed to Prosthetic in 2003? So
it was a long time ago. It was at the beginning.
Yeah. 22 years ago.
Yeah. I remember we would always go and check Lambgoat when we would get home from playing shows because you guys had such an extensive photography section. We would go play the New England Metal Fest, or we would play the New Jersey Metal Fest, and there was always like archival like sections where you could see the photos, and they would be uploaded, and there would be like tons of them. So we would go through and steal our promo photos from Lambgoat. Because that was the only people that we knew that was taking photos of us.
Yeah. We should probably get that back going. I mean, I don't know if that's Alex kind of like shunned that many years ago. Obviously, probably too much for him to take on and manage because he also has he had a regular job and a full-on family at some point. But yeah, I mean that we've talked about doing more photos and just getting more media on the website in general, whether it's video, photos, or articles. But yeah, I mean, it's been fun, obviously, chatting with bands like yours that have been around for a long time that are very well knowledgeable about Lambgoat also helps. Because a lot of newer bands may not surf the internet like we used to back in the day. Because I myself also used to go to Lambgoat back in the early 2000s. So there's a reason why I eventually came to the role that I'm in now.
There was another reason I personally love Lambgoat is because there were no better shit talkers than the posters who came to Lambgoat. I could always count on, if we were on Blabbermouth, it'd be a couple posts here or there. We go somewhere else, a couple posts. But anytime there was a Byzantine post on Lambgoat, I could always guarantee there was somebody that would talk about how old I looked or how awful we were. And I always loved that. Yeah. I would seek it out and be like, oh, that guy hates us. That guy, he called me Metal Santa. It's like, this is interesting. So Lambgoat had the greatest photos, the greatest shit talkers.
Well, though we don't have the photos as present on the website currently, we definitely still have those commenters and posters. For
That's
better
good to
or worse,
see. That's good to see.
It is kind of like a pain in the ass sometimes, because it's still anonymous, like it will always, for the most part, be. And we do have to moderate some things because,
in this day and age, I can see where it's harder to manage that. Yeah. Early 2000s, they let it fly. Because you remember back then with a click of your keypad, you could go to Metal Sludge and look at people's dicks. Things got, you could get away with a lot more murderous stuff back then So I always, I could see why it's probably more difficult to moderate Lambgoat nowadays.
We're still here doing it though. We do it and we still allow the anonymous comments, but again,
Yeah.
they're monitored for a bit. But again, like if an article from 3 years ago gets some wild comment, what am I going to do about that? Unless it's reported.
Yeah, exactly.
But either way, back to Harbingers. Let's, I appreciate the love for Lambgoat and your patronage and you just stealing the photos back in the day. I really do appreciate that.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, Harbingers. So I know in 2023 you guys kind of shared the first kind of snippets of like you writing the new album, and that was around the same time you guys did an EP or shortly after an EP and a live album. But your true studio album, The Cicada Tree, had was 7 years at that particular point. So what eventually got you on the next cycle of album?
Well, when we signed the Metal Blade right before the Cicada Tree, our album contract is, I think it's like two albums plus a Metal Blade gets an option. So it could either be 2 albums they'd let us go or 3. So we always knew we had to give them another one. We didn't expect it would take 8 years. It wasn't supposed to. But you know how life just somehow gets in the way all the time. So me and my wife decided to pop out a couple more kids. That takes time.
Yep.
COVID happened, which set everybody back a year and a half. And then my guitar player Hendo and I both around the same time, right after COVID, decided to start opening some new businesses. So we decided that we needed to give ourselves at least a year or two to fiscally get in the spot where these businesses could work. So once we did all that, bing, bang, boom, 7 years passes, and we're like, holy shit, we need to write an album. Now, Metal Blade, to be fair to them, they are the most lenient record label. They don't hammer you. They don't bother you. But I knew when Tracy Vera emailed us as like, hey guys, what's going on in your world? I knew we were in trouble. So we were like, it's funny you text me.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to write the new album right now.
I just sat down.
Totally lying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just life got in the way. But here we are 8 years in with a new album.
I'm trying to see what you guys were doing in the previous, within that 8 years. I know you guys, again, did some shows, did the live album, did the EP.
Yeah. The EP was basically just a stopgap. There was a period where I was like, holy crap, we're 4 years removed from the album or 3. I haven't written a riff. We need to do something. So we decided to just put that EP out, which was 4 songs from our demo that we did in 2000 and then 2 cover songs. So it was just a stopgap. It was so uninteresting. The Metal Blade, they even passed on it. They said, you just put it out yourself, OJ. So I just put it out like TuneCore.
There you go.
So,
it still works. But yeah, so like after like 2001, your drummer Matt Wolf kind of passes away, and then it kind of felt like you guys just kind of took another short break, obviously, because I'm sure within that time frame, within that next 18 months is when you probably get the text from Metal Blade or something like that. So were you doing show? I mean, obviously not after Matt passed away, but were you doing shows leading up to COVID and whatnot? Or were you kind of still taking a little break after that?
No, in 2017, we released the Cicada Tree. I think 2018, we did a full U.S. run with Sacred Reich, and we were hoping to do more, but we were having some booking agent issues, which has been a constant curse in our history. Either not having a booking agent or having a booking agent that doesn't know how to book you. And after we did the Sacred Rock run, our booking agent really just couldn't land anything for us that was worth getting in the van for. So we decided to just hang out, And Metal Blade, again, Well, I talked to Tracy and the ladies at Run Metal Blade, and they told me, they said, it's better for you guys to set your ass at the house and not play than to continue to go out and play to 30 people a night. It looks bad. It's a bad look. So keep your ass at home. Give us a new album when you can, and we'll try it again. So that's what we're doing now.
Back in that cycle. One thing that I've noticed about kind of like the discography, and more so, I try to do some comparison between you have 2 new singles that are released currently. You have Floating, I don't even fucking want to try to pronounce that second word, but then the Unattainable Sleep. So you have those 2 singles out. And one thing I noticed is that they're not drastically different than the Cicada Tree, but also if you kind of like take in your discography, it kind of feels like, though you are a groove progressive thrash band, you guys at least aren't scared to take risks outside of that box. And I feel like you guys, I don't know if I would if I were just like a random person that just found an album of yours and put it on, I don't necessarily know if I would even consider it thrash, just because I feel like there's so many different types of elements, not only in the new songs, but in the previous discography too.
Yeah, I think the thrash moniker is probably the least accurate that we can use at this point. Maybe when we started, our first couple albums had more thrash elements, but we were in our 20s and we were a little faster. Yeah. Now we're more of a mid-tempo groove band with progressive elements. But we're always trying to take risks. I think at this point, 7 years in or 7 albums in, if we started to just cookie cutter things and write formulaic music, our fans would have our asses. Most of our hardcore fans, they tell us they're expecting twists and turns, and they want to hear an ebb and flow. So that's gives us a lot of leeway to be creative with our music. Lurk, when we first started, even like our first album, we had a band meeting and we were like, what we want to do is have a unique sound. It might take 10, 20 years before we break through with it, but let's just stick to course and let's experiment early and often. And that's what we've stuck with.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be kind of strange and hard to do something like that, especially in like Charleston. I mean, I've been to and through West Virginia, and it's a little different than the rest of the East Coast and in Appalachia for that matter. So yeah, I mean, like, how do you even like find another person that has similar interests to you in this wild world of like metal?
That was the most difficult thing, and I think that's why it took us in our late 20s to even form this band, because all of the guys in the band, we were playing music in bands in our teens and early 20s, but it just took a lot of jumping from band to band before the right combination locked. Of getting me and Tony Rohrbaugh and Matt Wolf, our original drummer, in a band together. And that was the original boilerplate Byzantine sound, was us 3 together. So once we started to get our patented sound, I knew I had to make sure that no matter who left or who came in, they had to be willing to experiment and evolve and have fun with it. So, and that's what we've continued to do. And now we've got Tony Rohrbaugh back into the band, which is like a nice shot in the arm for this band.
A little steroid injection or or heroin, whichever one you want to just
right in the butt.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, speaking of the writing and the sound and stuff like that, what are some things that may be twists and turns or, unique to the listener that may not have been on the Cicada Tree, but are on Harbingers now? Because obviously there's a gap. There's almost a decade gap. So influences, likes, personal, things that you're into or other guys in the band are into are obviously, coming into you guys' universe in that decade. But like you just explained, Byzantine has like a sound that they want to kind of evolve with. But like, just want to like walk through maybe what are some of the changes or twists and turns that someone can expect.
That's a good question, specifically tailored to this album, which is Harbingers, which by definition means one who ushers in great change. So the changes that have occurred from the last album to this album, the biggest one being we added Ryan Postlethwaite as our bass player. This is the first album he's on, and he is a fantastic songwriter. Here comes my son right now.
Yeah.
Say hi.
Hi.
What do you want?
Can I have a snack?
Huh?
Can I have a snack?
You can have a snack, yeah. All right, snack approved. Here we go. So with Ryan in the band, Ryan is a fantastic songwriter. He grew up 10 miles away from where Tony Rohrbaugh grew up, so we all knew each other. So Ryan brought a slew of riffs and demo ideas. So we adding Ryan to the band was a giant change. Yeah. And the second thing that I think helped move our sound along from the Cicada Tree is that our drummer Matt Bowles had a lot more influence on this album. The Cicada Tree was his first album, and we basically brought him to the studio, showed him the demos, and then he would just regurgitate what we had already demoed out. So everything on the Cicada Tree, our drummer had never performed before. He was learning it in the studio. Thank God, I don't see how even, we got the album out.
Was he like nervous about showcasing like his own stuff or something?
Absolutely. I mean, he's 10 years younger than us. He was a fan of Matt Wolf's. So the whole time he was like, he said he felt like he just had the cops behind him watching him the whole time.
It's big shoes to fill too, obviously, if he's a fan of him and doesn't want to let you guys down and stuff. I get it.
So this album, he had a lot more free reign. So a lot of the drum fills and the accents and stuff on this album is from Matt. So it just seems like we had a little bit more community involvement on this album.
That's good. I want to know about the name.
Okay.
Yeah, like, so where does that come from? Are you just like, obviously there's a Byzantine Empire and stuff like that, and were you just kind of like obsessed with that growing up, and you just like, and how does the name even kind of dictate what the music sounds like, or is it just, separate?
Well, the beauty of like doing art and music is finding things that just have tie-ins and double entendres. I love that stuff. So when we were first trying to form the band, we didn't have a band name. I had a bunch of names wrote down, and I was trying to find something that would have a connotation to the type of music we were writing. And I knew our music was a little bit angular and a little bit, had multiple influences. So I was like, man, this music's a little complicated. Complicated kept coming to my head. Not like Meshuggah complicated, but, I was like, this is a little complicated. So I went on online and went on Roget's Thesaurus, which is the biggest thesaurus, and I typed in the word complicated. And one of the first synonyms that came up was Byzantine. And I was like, I knew of the Byzantine Empire succeeding the Roman Empire. I was like, why in the hell is that complicated? So then when I did the research, the Byzantine Empire had the most complicated judicial system ever put together. So much so that we still use it today. Like tenets of the Byzantine judicial system is a part of our system. So I was like, damn, that's awesome. That's hard. So I went online. Nobody had it as a band name. I was like, we're Byzantine. So, and we decided to just play on that trope. Our first demo, if you find it online, it just has a statue's head. It's Emperor Constantine. So, and we've just played on that throughout our whole career. We've written a song about Emperor Justinian. Irene of Athens, which is the first female ruler, is on the cover of this album. So, that's how we came up with it. because I was looking for a word for complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in the day when when you guys formed, I was still in high school, and like I said, I'd been one of the fucking idiots on Lambgoat back then too. But
Oh yeah,
so like there are many bands, and again, I wasn't into as heavy as of music as I am currently now, 20 years later. But I was just getting into it, so there was like, I remember seeing imagery from like bands like Nile and Byzantine and all these other kind of bands, that were kind of like had like some kind of international flair to the imagery, and it made me just kind of like think that. I mean, obviously Nile was like, I just thought like it was Egyptian styled metal or something like that, or they're just obsessed with, that stuff, and that was my bad because I was missing out on some great music from back then, which I still listen to now, but it took me like a decade to get into that. So,
yeah, the other thing, which could have been a blessing, could have been a curse, I don't know, is that we knew that the name Byzantine didn't give any connotation to what we sounded like. So, like if your band is Cannibal Corpse, that's going to be heavy. But Byzantine, you really don't know. So we thought that would help us in the beginning. Like people would be like, I need to listen to that, figure it out. But then I've had a lot of people through the years tell us that like, I heard the name, but I just, I heard it. I just never listened to you. That seems to be the consensus of the last 25 years. They know of us. They haven't checked us out yet.
Yeah.
So, so much so, Lurk, is that when we hired Peter Witchers from Soilwork to produce this album, and I thought, surely Peter has heard us because they came up 2 years before we did. Like all the same. We toured with all their friends and stuff, and Peter's like, hey, I've heard your name, but I've never listened to you. I was like, God dog it. So,
that's a bummer. Was that? Yeah, was it kind of like a bummer when you're like, God, I want this guy to be like our producer or work with us, and he's not going to know anything about us.
He told me, he said, give me a couple days, let me listen to some of your music, and then he called me back and he said, damn, this stuff is interesting. He said, I don't know how to categorize it, but all I know is I want in. I want to produce you. So I was like, heck yeah. Let's be best friends.
I'm not far off with my earlier question about being outside the box all the time and you can't really put a pin in it, but yeah, okay.
No.
And he's been in the business forever and never listened to you. So
yeah, like we've ripped off Soilwork for years and he still can't pinpoint us.
There you go.
So
that's great.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Speaking of like, writing the album, recording the album, was there anything that was like difficult or, hard for you guys to, while you were making the album, to like overcome or,
Yeah, this, to be honest, man, this album about killed me.
Okay.
Absolutely the hardest. And we've had some hard times in the studios, like drug abuse, people falling asleep playing drums. And, I just basically outed our first drummer. So, but this album was extremely difficult. And I haven't talked about this with anybody yet. But
let's go.
We might as well get into it.
Yeah.
So we hired Peter and we had the music written. The music, the demoing process, the songwriting process, the rehearsals, awesome. We had no problems. Brought Peter in, awesome, no problem. I own a recording studio here in Charleston, and I've always wanted to learn how to track and engineer. So I decided to engineer this album myself. We always would hire a recording engineer, but I said, fuck it. I have a studio. I'll do it. A lot of things I did wrong. I would send bad DI tracks to Peter. I would send things with, bounced them in mono instead of stereo. So I was making mistakes, learning as I went. But we got it to the point where finally Peter's like, everything's perfectly tracked. Let's send it to the mixing engineer. Metal Blade tells us that we have to quit working with our friends and we have to hire a big name mixing engineer.
Okay.
So they bump up our budget and we hire a guy, and I've been a fan of him for years. He's done a lot of major metal albums and rock albums. He starts to mix and he's like, dude, this sounds like shit. He's like, your bass tracks sound awful. Do you even know how to sing in a microphone? Are you cupping it? And I was like, no, what's wrong? So the mixes started coming back and they're awful, dude. They're awful. And I'm freaking out. I tell Peter's like, fuck that guy, make him do it again. Like, I've dealt with this. He's done big stuff. He should knock this out of the park. We go 2 or 3 months and the songs just get worse and worse. And I end up having to fire him, which was a very difficult conversation.
Yeah, I would assume.
Well, a week later, his manager calls me and he says, so we see that you guys are going to part ways with my guy. So what we have is a kill rate. He was like, so you basically owe us half the mixing budget, even though you're not going to use any of these mixes. So half of our budget completely goes away. I basically have to pay them just to leave. So now we're left with a tiny budget and no time, and we can't find anybody that will mix it. So then I start looking at local engineers. I go through a guy, he quits. Go through another guy, it sounds like crap. So I said, fuck it. I'm going to mix this thing myself.
Yeah.
And the guys in the band say, you cannot do this. You've never mixed anything in your life. This cannot be your first thing. And I was like, hold my beer.
Yeah.
Watch this. So what should have taken 6 months took 1.5 years because I went and paid thousands of dollars of my own money and went and took a mixing and engineering course while we were working on this. So I was staying up at night doing the coursework, and then ended up mixing it. So what you hear is my first ever mixing and recording of an album, which just happened to be on Metal Blade Records. So yeah, this was a hard one, dude.
Yeah. I could see, it sounds like it. Sounds like a lot of ups and downs. So like when you guys were tracking it, I'm trying to figure out where the disconnect was between like you, Peter, and this other guy. I mean, like, because Peter's an engineer and stuff like that,
Yep.
so he's definitely been around the block. So I just can't find the disconnect as to where like the other person, the person that was no longer involved, had all this trouble with the tracks or the stems or anything like that.
Well, the first issue was me. I was the X factor. I was the one messing things up until Peter got me lined out,
Right, but you weren't sending them like the messed up versions, I would assume.
Right, correct.
Okay.
By that time, we had sent him everything that Peter Witchers, who mixed and engineered Soilwork albums, approved. He was like, this is tits, send it along. The other guy's like, dude, this just sounds awful. And what's funny is Peter told me, he said, what it is that guy wants you to retrack it at his place.
Oh, yeah, it could be it.
Yeah. There's another issue we found out is that he took a job with a massive artist the same time he was mixing ours. So he was working on that one 5 days a week, coming home and working on ours Saturday and Sunday night after his ears were already toast. So we weren't getting what we thought we should have got. It was so by the time we gave it to the first local engineer, he said the exact same thing. He said, these tracks are awful. The bass is awful. Guitar's awful. And then I said, okay. So once I started learning through my mixing course that I took, I started listening to these tracks. I was like, they're great. These guys just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They could have made it sound good, but I think sometimes it takes more than the ear. You know what I mean? It takes the want and the love of it. And I love this album so much. I was able to spend the extra time to make it sound like it sounds.
Yeah. It doesn't sound horrible. I'll give you that. Kudos to the fucking
Thank you.
mastering on that, or
Thank you.
the whatever. Because if you would have told me, it just sounds like this is not a knock or anything like that, because it is on Metal Blade, but it sounds like
Right.
any record that you would pick off the shelf.
Yeah, it does. My main goal, I knew it wasn't going to going to be a Mutt Lange, like a Queensrÿche Empire, nothing like super like that. But my goal was to make it sound across the board as good as most of them out there, because I know the next one I'll get better and the next one I'll get better. But everything's audible. It's punchy. It's heavy. There's stuff moving around. So I checked all the boxes. Yeah, it just took me a long time. The other issue I had, which I forgot to mention, was the week before I started recording rhythm guitars. Right, I'm getting ready to go in the studio. We've got the tone set. I'm at work. I'm a general contractor, so I do bathroom remodels. I go to open the window in the bathroom that is always unlocked at this job site, and the homeowner locked it without me knowing. So I yank at the window and I snap the tendon holding my bicep onto my forearm. So I snapped the distal tendon. I heard it pop like a rubber band. I was like, oh my God. It's a 3 to 4 month arm in the sling rehab. So the week after that, I'm in the studio with a sling trying to record the rhythms, and I can't even triplet. I can't down pick. So that set the album back 3 months right there for me to let my arm heal. What you hear on the album, like the first song, I recorded that one 4 times from beginning to end. You know what I mean? Yeah. Every guitar note, I would go back and be like, oh, no, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. My arms still hurt. It's not good enough. You know?
And then in the end, it still wasn't good enough for those guys.
Still wasn't good enough. Yeah. No shit. So yeah, to circle back, yeah, this album was a difficult one.
Yeah, it sounds like, especially with the injury and the dealing with it's multiple people involved, and of course it's taken 12, 18 months or whatever to get out and get rolling.
I was literally in the studio for 15 months. I was isolated. I was depressed. I was doing things over and over. I was second guessing myself because I hadn't recorded and mixed anything.
I would be doing the same thing. In my head, I would just think, this is all shit. All of this is shit. Yeah.
I was doing everything you shouldn't do as a mixing engineer. I was overthinking. I wasn't using my ears. I was looking at levels. I would go and just mix down the drums and bass and go in the truck and listen. You're not supposed to do that because nobody listens to your album just drum and bass. So at the end, I was like, you know what? Screw all these plugins. I'm just going to use the volume, turn it up until it sounds good, and then bounce it. And then it started sounding good.
Yeah. I'm, as someone who does a lot of things like in that same kind of mindset of like, I've never done this before. Fuck it. I'm going to just try it. There's also some benefit of that because you don't know the bad things to not do. You know what I mean? And then sometimes that does work for you or work for your workflow or playthrough or whatever the sound is like. So there's so many things that we've done, as for Lambgoat as a company, behind the scenes that we should have probably never attempted because we, if you ask the layman or whatever, they're like, oh, it's too difficult to do that, yada, yada. But then, me and my partner Dylan just kind of think of something and we're like, let's go do it. And then we spend a month doing it and then it's done. And we're like, oh my God, that was easy. But it's not really because you're focused on it so much time and you're putting so much effort into it. You don't realize that it is difficult or that you shouldn't do it this way or that way.
That's the ignorance is bliss. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, I didn't know any better. So we just slogged right through and we got it done.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that really helped me on this album is having some connections in the music industry because I was bouncing things off of friends. I have a friend, Drew Mazurek, that mixed our second album. Him and Brad Divins did the mix on the second album. And Drew now works for Universal Audio. He makes plugins. So his ears are perfectly tuned, and he mixed 3 Byzantine albums, so he knows what we're supposed to sound like. So I sent him the first mix, and the first thing he said was, he said, "It sounds bogged down. How many plugins do you have?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Go through and count every plugin, everything effect you have. Tell me how many you have." And I did, and I said, "I've got 112. He said, "Cut that in half."
Wow.
And I was like, "What? How?" He said, "Close your eyes, turn it off. If you don't hear any change, get it the fuck out of the mix." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got it down to about 50 plugins, and it immediately like just sounded mean. And I was like, "Thank you, God. Thank Drew." So yeah, just having some connections, some ears to bounce it off of. I got us through this, because there was times when our bass player and our guitar player was like, "This album's not coming out, is it?" And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think
Eventually.
Yeah.
Speaking with, you having to like play that kill rate or whatever, with the other producer or the mixing person, Metal Blade couldn't like help out, not pay for it obviously because they gave you the budget, but they couldn't like come in and like strong arm or trying to like, team up. You guys just battle the manager and him, or
they were mad at me. They were mad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I fired him without talking to them first, and then when I told them, they were like, "You did what?" And I said, "Yeah," and unfortunately half our budget's gone. And they were like, "Yeah, no shit. That's called a kill rate. That's that's an industry thing." And they said, "It's on you, OJ. This was your call to fire that person, so figure it out." Yeah. So I'm kind of glad, because now I have a new profession. Now I am a mixing engineer working in my studio, tracking bands. So through all that, something good come out of it for sure.
Yeah, you had spoke earlier about opening businesses with another person and in the band. And was that kind of like the business there? Obviously, it's not like, I don't know, maybe he is helping you do bathrooms and general contracting, but is the studio kind of like the business you guys opened up? And then my other follow-up to that is, why would you do that with no experience in engineering or audio work?
Right. So yeah, right when the pandemic hit is when I decided to open this business. So my business, the second one I opened, because I'm a general contractor and I do bathrooms. I bought an engine and transmission shop here. It's 6,000 square feet, and I wanted to have a rehearsal facility. So something to where I could rent out spaces for bands to rehearse. I put an Airbnb above it, so when bands come into town, they can stay. Things like that.
Nice.
So I wanted to own some land. I wanted to own a property and get into that. Every time we would start a tour, like if we started it in LA or New York, we would have to rent space to rehearse in like this. And there was not any spaces like that in West Virginia, so I wanted to build one. The studio came about later. We had a large room down there that we were rehearsing in, and then I realized this is dumb. I'm not making any money off of myself renting. So I convinced a engineer in town to shut his studio down and move it into my space. And that started rolling into then, well, now I'll make a smaller room on side of that and I'll do some tracking. And then it led to me becoming a mixing engineer. Our guitar player, his business is completely different. He opened a restaurant, so he's way smarter than I am. Yeah.
Well, he's also like, restaurants are kind of hard because you got to kind of somewhat be married to that. So maybe he's not as smart. You know what I mean?
Totally married to it. He's been a bartender in town for 15 years. Everybody knows him. So him going into a pub style restaurant was just perfect for him, Because then he already brought all this foot traffic. Everybody wanted to go to Hendo's new place. And, renting rehearsal spaces to broke ass musicians I make a lot less money than he does slinging.
But you're not married to it.
burgers.
You're not married to it. You know what I mean? So you have some free time.
I go down there every once in a while if the heat's not working or to pick up a check. A lot of times I just go down there and tinker around in the studio. Yeah. So it's fun.
Well, you have it at your disposal. Why not?
I do.
What was OJ's first exposure to heavy music in West Virginia? And how did that shape you? Was it like a parent, brother, guy in class, or just stumbled on the internet one day?
The genesis of me getting into any type of heavy music was my older two brothers. My middle brother, who's 5 years older than me, we had to share a room when I was in grade school, and he was in junior high, and he had Twisted Sister and Ozzy and Wasp, cassette tapes, and I got into that big time. But when I got into junior high, I had a friend who was kind of rough. He had a broke down school bus in his backyard for some reason. I don't know why. And we would go back there and smoke cigarettes. And he was a metalhead, and he let me hear Master of Puppets. The first song I ever heard was song 1 on side B, which was Disposable Heroes. And I was just like, what is this? Like I said, I've been listening to Twisted Sister and Judas Priest, but Metallica is a whole different animal.
Right. Especially back then,
Yeah, so just hearing that, I was like, holy shit. That's kind of like, I never felt that again until I first heard Destroy, Race, and Prove by Meshuggah. It's like, oh my God, what is this? So yeah, I would say that's probably what most people my generation always say is like Metallica.
Of course,
or
but
Metallica or Megadeth.
But it's also at the time, there's only fucking, I don't know, 10 bands that are in that vein, you know what I mean? That are are out on the radio or on fucking somewhere other than maybe some weird cassette trading fucking thing at a show. But even then, pre-internet, it's Metallica or one of the fucking big ones,
Yeah, that's it, man.
But it's deserving so. I mean, a lot of younger kids listen to Metallica's newer stuff, right? And they don't really understand that it's, drastically different than the earlier stuff. And
exactly. My 17-year-old daughter is like, hey, you ever heard this song? And she played something off of Black Album, and I'm like, ever heard this song?
This is Sandman.
Yeah, I was like, honey, this was, we've been doing this for 35 years. This Metallica
been ripping this
stuff.
off. I've been ripping this off. I mean, I was one of those people that I think in middle school, high school, I got into Metallica then. Because my dad and my parents and my family weren't listening to heavier stuff. They were listening to rock and AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, and stuff like that. So there was rock in my world, but there wasn't anything like thrash Metallica. So when Load or Reloads, that's kind of when I started entering the Metallica, sphere. And then from there, friends of mine in high school then showed me the earlier shit, and I was like, oh, okay, fucking wild. And I never saw them live until they played Rockville 2 nights. They played a throwback set, and then they played the Black Album in reverse.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so I have to say the Black Album reverse was more boring than the first night of just hits. You know what I mean?
I bet. Yeah. I bet. Yeah.
So.
Was the Black Album to me seems like a studio album. There's The God That Failed and My Friend the Misery. There's some longer sections that get kind of slow.
Yes.
I could see where live that'd be like, I'm gonna go grab a beer.
Yeah. The only problem is it's in a festival and there's fucking 80,000 people around you, so it's
you can't move.
Yeah. And then you're just sitting there. You go, I just want to hear Sandman. It's the last fucking song they'll play that night.
Yeah. That's funny.
Growing up in West Virginia, how does that, affect your worldview for one, and how does that affect your approach to music?
With music, we're real so insular here and insulated. I'm sure by the time I was getting music, and in my little town, the town I grew up in, we only had 2,000 residents. So I was probably even getting it earlier than most people living around me. Because my mom, when I was in ninth grade, bought a tape store, opened a tape store, and she would allow me and my stepdad to pick the music, and he was a metalhead. So I was getting inundated with a lot of stuff that most people in West Virginia had never heard of at that time. But as far as the music scene goes, we're so geographically separated from each other. Like there's only like 4 kind of cities in West Virginia, and they're so separated by mountains that the music scenes were all like small little pockets.
Yeah.
So, and there's only been like a handful of bands, heavy bands, to ever come out of West Virginia to get signed. Yeah. So,
are you saying that like the states kind of like has these heavy metal hollers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Just like you travel an hour and a half through some mountains, and all of a sudden you're in Huntington, and it flattens out, and then there'll be a killer scene there, but then you got to go 3 more hours till you see the next one. The good thing, the worst thing about growing up here in the music scene is that it takes you an incredibly long time to get discovered. Now, maybe not so much with the internet, everything being profusive, but back then, before Snapchat and Instagram, like it took us, till we were in our late 20s to figure it out. The good thing about it is that you don't come out sounding like a scene. Like if you're from Massachusetts, there was a lot of bands that kind of boilerplate sounded like Killswitch, over and over. Or if you come from the Bay Thrash area, like a lot of bands sounded like Testament or Exodus. But here, every band that got signed sounded completely different from each other. We had in Morgantown, we had Karma to Burn, which was the instrumental 3-piece that signed the Roadrunner, opened up for Metallica. Then in Huntington, we had a band called Chum that got signed to Century Media that sounded like King's X mixed with Faith No More. It was just completely different. And then us, from Charleston, that had the Meshuggah Opeth Pantera thing. Mm-hmm. So you could be very unique here because nobody's going to hear you anyway. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Is Morganville like the more of a hotbed? I assume that is because the university's there and whatnot, and kids are coming, in and out of there. So I would assume that there's not, I want to say more of a scene, but just more action going on over there.
Oh yeah. At times, like when West Virginia University is in,
I should say that when classes in.
Yeah, you got 40,000 extra residents there, so the bar scene and the venue scene was always good there. That was where a lot of the touring bands would come. There. So when I went to college there, that's where I cut my teeth, was in Morgantown, the bar scene. Unfortunately, my band was awful at that time, so it didn't help. But at least I got to see some great bands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does success in metal look like for Byzantine today?
If I could put a pin in saying what I would like success to look like, it would be, one, to continue from the beginning to the end of our discography, whenever that happens, to always put out top shelf heavy metal. No giant dips. That is number one. We talk about that all the time in the band, is that we've got to keep our music consistent and creative and organic, or we just need to hang it up. The other success that I would like to see that we have not achieved yet is more exposure and more live exposure. We've never had the opportunity in the last 15 years to really perform live for big crowds. That would be a measure of success for us. All of us yearn for that. We're all so domesticated, and it's by force. That just playing a festival would blow our minds, much less playing the whole European festival circuit.
Have you guys tried to do that? I mean, obviously in the last fucking decade, you guys haven't really been supporting an album outside of after the pandemic. So have you guys tried to even like get onto the North American or European festival circuit?
Good question. We have submitted for every Danny Wimmer festival for the last 4 years straight, and we goose eggs.
I can't say I won't say give up on that because they are doing I think they do the best job as far as like the undercard of a festival is concerned, and they have 4 days. It's like we just came back from it last weekend or whenever it was, and outside of it being extremely hot, like this was the first year that we actually had to be there at like gates because most of the bands that we're watching are starting at like fucking 12 or 1 and then going in till like 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and we didn't really stay for most of the headlining kind of stuff. We kind of left because it was just like we have another day of this all day in the sun, so like we had to go and rest up. But yeah, I mean, I would say continue because eventually someone in there is going to be like,
yeah. I mean, if we stop doing it, then we'll never get it. So we're going to just keep doing it. We've heard from some of the higher ups in these festivals and stuff that the main concern with us is our social media following is just awful, and that we have to get that up. Oof. So Metal Blade has told us you guys have to post. You gotta be present online. Be on Facebook, be on TikTok, all this stuff. So that's what we're working on right now. Yeah. It's a slog because we have kids and businesses, and then I have to spend 2 hours in the morning editing content, and you know how it is.
Dude, I do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I could see your reaction in your head that you're
and from someone who doesn't like, who just probably hasn't had to do that within their career as a musician or just a person on the internet, it's fucking daunting. I can fathom it's just like
real
horrible.
Daunting. We went on Fiverr and hired a social media manager to help us for 3 months. And that was a big turning point. Our social media is starting to cook with gas now, but she had to literally give me a schedule and be like, you post here at this time, here, be consistent, be present. And that's helped. But it's going to take years of doing it to get it to the point before I think Danny Wimmer and them maybe will look at us. We're hoping 2026 will be ready and get some nods for some festivals. The one thing, Lurk, that I think is a benefit for anyone who owns a festival or anything watching this, a benefit for getting us, is that now we're all in such financial secure places that we could play for damn near nothing.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short, though. It's a festival. It's a cash grab. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not going to say pay us nothing, but give us something. But, we just put us on stage. We will kill it at the merch booth.
There you go. I should probably tell you, you're only allowed to have like a shirt or 2 shirts at the merch.
Yeah, I've heard. Okay. I've talked to some other friends, and they said it's kind of,
unless you're like Linkin Park headliner or Metallica or something like that, they get their own little section. You know what I mean? But the rest of the fucking bands have like a shirt. It's a giant wall, and it takes like an hour to get into that fucking tent.
That's crazy.
It is pretty nuts.
But it would be nice to do boats, doing the boats thing, the Headbangers Balls Lamb of God boat.
Yeah.
We're hoping to be on that. We almost got it this time. Willie Adler went to the booking agency and said, we got one open slot. Byzantine gets it. And they were like, nope, not this year.
Sorry.
So I was like, even Lamb of God can't get us on the Lamb of God boat.
Hey, well.
He said, next year, dude. Next year.
Well, hey, there you go. You got that going for you then, hopefully.
Yeah.
We're kind of sponsoring tours again. We've made that kind of like Lambgoat's trying to get out in the real world and not just be online for the last 25 fucking years. So we've kind of been sponsoring certain events like Furnace Fest or like certain tours. And eventually, hopefully that will lead into like a event, a Lambgoat event.
Like a Lambgoat event.
Yeah. So we'll see where that goes.
Man.
OJ, for my last question, man, I can't let you off the hook without asking, because I think you're in the same area as this family. So like, do you ever run into, or do you ever run into Jesco White out there?
I have never ran into Jesco White. Jesco, his family is
The wonderful wild whites of West Virginia.
Wild, wonderful whites of West Virginia. They're about 40 minutes south of where I live. But where I grew up, they were about 15, 20 minutes away. So I grew up very close to them. His sister Mamie, who is a wild woman, used to come into our bowling alley in my town, and she would come in there and shoot pool and drink beer and fight. And fight. And or pick a guy, and you were going home with her whether you wanted to or not. She would grab you like a caveman. You're mine. Yeah. So, and the funny thing was, Lurk, is like back in the early 90s, she was, maybe I'm gross, but she was kind of attractive.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I could see that before, fucking any of the fucking pills or drugs or whatever get in West Virginia.
It was but before the pills. This is just when, she was just chewing tobacco and drinking Budweiser. But I was like, her body's nice. But my older brother's like, if you see her in the bowling alley, you walk away.
Oh man. Yeah. Is that like, as a West Virginia resident, I mean, cause dude, I grew up on Jackass. So when that movie came out, that just became like a hit for every one of my friends. And like me and my girlfriend, we constantly are quoting that fucking movie still to this day, just on, whatever happens. But like as a West Virginia resident, like how do you guys feel about that little documentary in general?
We love it. We love it. It's a very condensed piece of history. It takes a lot. People outside of West Virginia think, oh my God, that's a crazy family. And then I'll look at it and be like, I went to school with 10 more families just like that. Right. So odd thing is I didn't see that video when I was living in West Virginia. I was in my freshman year at Baylor University in Waco, Texas.
Nice.
I went to school at Baylor and then transferred to WU later. But I was in Baylor and somebody brought in a VHS tape and said, Ojeda, aren't you from West Virginia? And I was like, yeah. And they was like, watch this. And they popped it in. And I was like, oh my God, and then I was like, those fuckers are from like 15 miles from where I grew up.
Yeah, that's insane.
And it was intense. And then I have a certain affinity for them too, because I am a big Hank Williams 3 fan.
Yeah.
And one of his albums, he has Jesco on it, and he sings about Jesco's mom. And every time I listen to that album, it just brings me back to watching, them old sloppy, slimy eggs.
Yeah. Dude, they took her baby. Yeah, dude, that's just, there's got so many one-liners in there.
So many.
I'm going to cut you loose, but now you had me. I got one more thing because I'm interested in the your time in Waco. Did you ever go to the Branch Davidians area?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did too recently in the last year.
Did you?
Last year, yeah.
Where do you live?
I'm in Florida, Jacksonville.
Okay.
So we could also do like a Western Wild Whites of Florida here too.
Yes, you could.
But.
Yeah, you could. But no, the first year I went there was in 94. I got there 4 weeks after the compound burned down.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so the ATF were still all over town. It was still smoking. When I landed on the airplane, I could still see the ATF and it was smoking. So it was very new. Me and a couple of girls took a car out there one night drinking, and we got stuck in the ditch, and the ATF had to help us out. I thought I was going to prison.
Yeah.
But they just made us pour out all our Zima.
Yeah.
And then told us to go home.
They probably saw that you were drinking Zima, and they're like, fucking kooky kids, get out of here.
Yeah, they're like, this boy will get butt raped in jail. We're going to let him go.
It was quite the experience. Me and my girlfriend's family lives in Dallas, and it just so happened that I was like, you know what? It's only like an hour or two away or whatever. I was like, we should take a day and just drive down there and check it out. Cause I like this like dark tourism vibe. Like I like to fucking go and see where like things have happened, whether they're good or bad. But man, that was wild. And there was a lady there that was the caretaker was still there.
Really?
And they have a small church on the grounds. And it's like open and you can just go in, drive in and walk in and walk around. And she was there. And I guess like her husband was there at the raid.
Yeah.
and everything. But yeah, stuff is still around. Like you can still see the foundation, and there's like
Those poor people.
yeah, it's wild.
Those poor people.
But then I also got connected with like Ruby Ridge and Oklahoma City because they're all like fucking connected in some weird way. But
yeah,
I
will wrap this up with my last Branch Davidian story,
Okay.
and then we can leave. So when all that happened on TV and we raided it and killed everybody, my parents told me, do not go down there and get involved with them Branch Davidians. I was like, Mom, they're all dead. What are you talking about? They're all dead. I get down into Waco. Within 2 months, I start putting posters up, musician looking for band. I'm a singer. I get a call, and the guy calls me, and he said, yeah, man, I don't know if you know. He said, I was David Koresh's guitar player. And I was like, get out of town.
Shit.
He said, yeah. He said, I left there 2 weeks before it burnt down because I started seeing the guns. My Marshall full stack burned, everything, all my stuff. And I was like, God dog it, my mom's going to kill me.
Right.
The first thing she told me was not to get involved with him. So I joined the band with this guy. And David Koresh was on our shirts, our band shirts. He promoted it. I thought he was full of shit, to be honest, Lurk. I thought he was lying. One day he calls me in the morning and he said, hey, Ojeda, turn on Maury Povich. I was like, what? He said, turn on Channel 8. So I turned it on. Maury Povich was in Waco doing a show called Tragedy at Waco. And there was my damn guitar player on the stage. And I was like, he was not lying.
Wow. I'm going to have to go back and look at some shit just so I can see him.
Yes.
Yeah.
His name was Eddie Goins, and Goins, and the guy could rip. And he told me his drummer was Dave Thibodeau. And then
that sounds familiar. That name sounds familiar just from watching so much shit.
Yeah, it's called Thibodeau crawled out of the window and he got out. He escaped. But Eddie Goins, Dave Thibodeau, Dave Koresh, and apparently everybody in town said Koresh was an awesome cat.
I mean, I've heard a lot of things too, and I heard that the guns were already there. There was an army base and shit like that. I mean, I went down rabbit holes with that whole thing.
Bad thing is, he was so awesome that he got a lot of girls, and he had sex with some people that was underage, and religion, man, he'll make you do some crazy stuff.
I mean, I don't get it, but I could understand how like someone with that much charisma and power at that point within that little group is just going to abuse it and try to be like a Charles Manson kind of guy. But even then,
I know, man.
That's a whole nother black hole, dark hole to go down, rabbit hole.
Yeah, we'll do that on a different podcast.
No problem. OJ, it was great chatting with you, brother.
You too.
Congratulations on the new album coming out in the next couple of weeks here, and congratulations on getting it out there. Obviously, it was a very traumatic experience in general. So I'm lucky I'm happy you are on the other side of that.
Yeah, man, I'm all good. I do yoga all the time, so my arm's healed. I'm ready to go out and play some shows. Let it rip, and hopefully everybody checks out our album. Comes out June 13th on Metal Blade Records.
Harbingers. All right.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, brother.